A man steals a kiss from this woman. Another man gets into the car. The atmosphere becomes heavy and the woman thanks him for his help. Calvin asks his wife if everything is all right. She replies that everything is fine. He asks her if she's sure, and she says yes. Calvin asks the driver to take them home. He carries out the request. Jess asks her husband how his day at work went. He replies that it was normal. She isn't satisfied with that answer and wants to know more. Calvin doesn't want to tell her the details. He says he just worked and worked, taught the staff new things, also that he could keep her and the house. Jess frowns, and the driver is indignant at what he's just heard. Jess notices that her husband is a little stressed. She thinks they should do something to relax, go out for the weekend. Calvin really is stressed, but he needs to work. After all, he's the one who supports the house and her, and that takes a lot of money. Jess thinks that they need to take some time out, just the two of them. Life can't just be about work. He says he'll think about it and then they'll talk, and asks the driver to go faster. Jess comes excitedly to ask her husband what he thinks of the clothes she's wearing, but finds him already asleep. She can't believe he slept. He's keeping her waiting once again. She's showered, perfumed herself, put on a new outfit, but unfortunately, it's all been in vain. She can't stand it any longer. Every time it's the same thing. She gets all dressed up, and when she gets to the bedroom, she finds her husband asleep. She reflects that she needs a real man, someone who loves her, gives her attention and affection, not someone who falls asleep every time she gets ready. That way she'd better stay single. The driver shows up and finds her so beautiful. He pays attention to her, kisses her, and makes her feel good. But it's all just a sleep fantasy. Calvin freaks out, but his wife says it's all right, it was just a bad dream. She gets up, but he goes back to sleep. Calvin is changing. Jess asks if he's going to work yet. He says yes, he can't stop, he has to work and work, she knows how it is. Jess has been thinking about it, and thinks it would be a good idea for them to go on a trip, take some time alone, enjoy each other's company. It would be good to get away from the routine of just working. They need to spend some time together, so he can forget about the stress of everyday life. Calvin remains silent, and Jess insists on an answer. She wants to know what he thinks of the idea. Calvin thinks it's all too easy for her. Going on a trip requires time, and he doesn't have it. Jess understands his side of things, but she also thinks that they need some time alone. Calvin says he doesn't have time. He needs to work. What she's saying is nonsense, and she doesn't need to worry about it. Jess says she's not going to ask for an immediate answer, she's going to give him time to think. Calvin says he'll think about it. He asks Jess to tell Philip to get the car ready as he's already leaving. Jess doesn't understand why he's in such a hurry. Is he just going to leave without waiting for her? She was just changing to go with him. Calvin is in a hurry and tells his wife to get a cab. He can't wait. She says it's fine, and tries to say goodbye, but he rejects the kiss she would have given him. Philip asks if Jess wants him to drive her to her destination, but she replies that it won't be necessary as her husband is in a hurry and will need the car. He even asks her to call a cab and go alone. In fact, she asks him to leave the car running. Jess asks why he kissed her again. He replies that Jess is more beautiful every day, and he is more in love every day. She says he can't keep doing that. Philip replies that what she needs is a man who treats her well, appreciates her, and recognizes her as the wonderful person she is. She stops him. It's not right. Philip agrees. It really isn't right. After all, Calvin isn't being faithful to her. Jess wants to know what he means. Philip is Calvin's chauffeur, so he knows everything. He hears all the boss's conversations on the phone, everything he says. He asks Jess to trust him and get into the trunk of the car, and he'll show her everything. Jess can't do that. It's crazy. Philip convinces her to trust him and get in the car. She needs to know the truth. Jess still thinks it's all crazy, but Philip tells her she'll see that it's not. Jess thinks he's being silly, but Philip is sure he'll prove his point. Philip leaves the house and gets into his car. He asks Philip to drive him to the airport. Philip apologizes for intruding, but asks if Calvin has decided to leave his wife. He replies that he has. He couldn't bear to spend another minute in that house. Philip says, with all due respect, that Jess is very beautiful. Calvin asks him to concentrate on the work he has to do. There's a popular saying that the same thing over and over again gets boring, and that's what happened to Calvin. He got tired of his wife. Calvin didn't know how to tell his wife that he didn't like her anymore. Every night he had to pretend to be asleep so he wouldn't have to talk to her. He didn't have the heart to say it, but one day she'll understand. Jess asks Philip to stop the car right now. Calvin is extremely surprised to see her. He can't believe this is happening and asks Philip to unlock the door. Philip helps Jess out of the car. Calvin wants to know what she was doing hiding in the car like that and demands an explanation. Jess says that's enough. She doesn't want to hear any more, not after everything she's heard in the car. She just doesn't understand what she did wrong. What did she do wrong at the wedding? Why is this happening to her? Calvin doesn't know how to tell her, but everything she heard in the car is true. He hasn't known how to explain it for a long time, but it was unbearable living in the same house with her. He didn't feel anything anymore, but it wasn't his fault or hers. It was something that happened over time, and that's why he decided to leave. Jess thinks his attitude is cowardly. How can he say all this nonsense? Calvin needs to confess something. He's seeing someone else. Jess finds what she's just heard unbelievable. It's not possible that he's just saying that now. Calvin thinks it's a good thing she heard everything, because he wouldn't have the courage to say it. Jess can't believe he could do all this to her. But he'll listen to what she has to say. She says she's seeing someone else too. Do you want to see? Calvin is surprised. Since when have they been together? Philip seizes the opportunity and says that he's actually always been in love with Jess. They need to think about the good side of the situation. Now they're both free. They can each go their separate ways and be happy. Jess agrees with what he has just said. Now Calvin is free to be happy, and so is she, with someone who treats her well, who values her, and not someone who always runs away from her, treating her badly, as Calvin always did. Calvin says she's right. She deserves to be happy too. He apologizes, but Jess doesn't accept it and says he can leave. That's enough. Calvin tells Philip to take good care of Jess. She's a great woman. Philip and Jess stay together, and Calvin goes back to his car, picks up his suitcase, and decides to get to the airport on his own. Jess says that Flip can let her go now. That's not right. He wants to know why. Didn't she hear everything Calvin just said? Jess is confused, but she still likes Calvin. She said all this in the heat of the moment, but she still loves Calvin. Philip says he doesn't just want a moment with her, he wants to spend his whole life with her. She won't go through the same situation as she did with Calvin. He can make her the happiest woman in the world. She just needs to give him a chance. Jess convinces herself and says she can give them a chance to be together.